Okay. Well, how many of you thought you'd come to church this morning to get free stuff? Okay, a few of you. Well, you are going to get free stuff today. In fact, we're going to start off with a reverse offering. The ushers, please come forward. Yes, you heard me right. A reverse offering. This is your chance to take something out of the offering plate. As the offering plate comes by, please take a dollar bill. It's yours to keep. It's yours to do whatever you like with. Thank you. And as they're doing that, I'm going to just explain a little bit of why we're doing it and where we are in our series. We've been talking about on a sermon series of Journey of the Heart, where we've been looking at some spiritual practices that we can all do that will help us make this journey from our head to our heart and to live a more heart-centered life, a life that's more connected to God, to each other, to our deepest selves. We started out by looking at prayer and learning how consistency is more important than content. And we learned about waiting and remaining focused on the idea that God is still God when we're in those times when it feels like God is silent, when our prayers are not going answered. And then we took a look at meditation and how we need to take time to just focus our attention on God and to allow our thoughts to flow freely in different ways that we might practice meditation. And then we looked at gratitude. And last week, Jackson talked to us about gratitude in his life and how it has made a difference. And today we're going to look at one of the areas that is perhaps one of the most pervasive and important parts of our life, and it has the most potential for greatest impact on every other part of our life. Amen. And that is, you guessed it, money. That's right, we're going to talk about money today. Jesus said more and did more about giving and generosity than any other topic in the Gospels. He said more about giving and more about generosity than he said about rules and regulations. He said more about those things than anything else. And in fact, you can look at Jesus' entire life. The entire plan of salvation is a plan of giving, of God giving to all of humanity salvation in the person of Jesus. So giving is at the core and the foundation of a spiritual life. You cannot have a spiritual life and not practice giving. Amen. Let me say that again. You cannot have a spiritual life and not practice giving. Amen. So this really isn't a sermon about money. It's a sermon about your spirituality. All right. And how this has a place in it, and a very important place. If you believe that the words that you say and the actions that you take are a reflection of your discipleship, that they're a reflection of what you believe and what you know to be true for yourself, then what you do with your money is also a reflection of what you believe and what you say. Just as an example, we live in a country that places a very high value on free speech, and the Supreme Court has said that money is speech. And that opened the way to allowing corporations and individuals to spend any sum of money on political campaigns. Now that's, whatever you believe about that is your belief, but if corporations can speak with their money, then why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we as followers of Jesus also speak with our money? The question is, what do we want to say? And so we need to begin our conversation about money by looking at what it means to us. So take a look at this dollar bill that you have. Look at it and keep it out or keep it around you for the rest of the service. What does this dollar mean to you? Not what does it buy today, or not what can it get you, but what does it mean? There's a big difference. I found that during my ministry, when couples come for counseling, the struggle that they often most are dealing with is around money. And what it comes down to is money means different things to each person in the couple. Let me just give you an example. In my relationship with my ex-partner, He grew up in a family that was very, very conscious about money. Both his parents grew up very poor, and his father worked very hard in his life in order to provide for his family. And his mother was a very cost-conscious individual, and they counted every penny, and they saved every penny. Anything that they didn't have to buy, they put in the bank. And my partner grew up with that mentality. He became a banker. And so tracking money and keeping it safe was what he was all about. And he was able to save money. He had money. I had no idea where it came from. If he wanted to buy something, he'd pay cash for it. He always had cash. And he was always very careful. He's one of those people who could give himself an allowance right after he got paid, and that would last him for 2 weeks. Not me. I'm totally the other way. My parents, my family, we never talked about money. It just kind of magically appeared. I always thought if you have more checks, you have more money. That's the way it worked in my family. And yeah, I had to work for my allowance and things like that, and I learned the value of $1. But my parents gave. They tithed to the church. They gave to other people. They gave to causes they believed in and things that were important to them. And so I grew up with the idea that money is something that you share and something that you give away. And as I grew in my spirituality, I found that money is also a way that you can bring people together. And for me, enjoying fellowship with friends and family and enjoying fellowship with church, those became more important to me. And so I never tracked my money. I never kept it. And I would always give it away. And that was a big problem between the two of us. So we have to look at what money means to us. And we have to understand, is it about security? Is it about having the ability to purchase things? Does it mean having safety? Or does it mean having opportunities to fellowship and share? Is it a means to an end? Or is it a cause of strife? Is it a way to manipulate people? Or is it a way to bless people? What does this money represent for you? How did your parents deal with money? And what did you learn from them that's still with you today? Does money represent security or a hedge against the unknown? How does this money make you feel when you think about it? I want you to just let those questions roll around in your mind, because there is no right or wrong answer. This is just about what you believe and what you feel. And then that leads us to the next important question. Where does money come from? Where does it come from? What is the source of what we have? It's actually fascinating that in our economy, money actually comes from a computer. There is some department in the U.S. Treasury that manages the money supply. And if more dollar bills are needed, they just put a command into a computer system and more dollar bills are printed. Whatever denomination is needed, that's how they control the money supply. There's somebody that actually does that. There's a room someplace with lots of security around it. So in our country, where does money come from? It comes from the government that can simply print it. But in our life, where does it come from? Does it come from your ability to work? Of course. Does it come from your ability to receive whatever income you are receiving? Yes. So it comes from your life. It comes from your ability to be alive. In our gospel reading, this is an account of a time when Jesus was watching at the temple, and Jesus liked to people watch, and this is one of them. And he notices these people that give these big long prayers, and he comments on them, people that do put on a big show. And he's sitting there at the treasury, and the temple had been destroyed centuries before. And then the Roman occupiers came in, and they began to rebuild the temple in order to appease the Jews, in order to make a sense of peace and to firm their occupation. And this building project, as it was going on, needed money, and so they had these very large boxes, and they have been uncovered archaeologically, so they know something of what they look like. And they did not have paper money back then, or checks, they only had coins. So these boxes were very large, and they had like a funnel on the top, a cone, and people would put their coins in. And people would sometimes, what they would do is, if they were going to make a large donation, like instead of putting in $1 coin, they would put in 100 pennies so that it would make a big noise. Just like last week when we were taking up the secondhand offering and we dropped all the coins. And that's what people would do. They would come and they would make this big show and all this clamor and clanging of the coins falling in. And all these people going by, making their show. And then this little tiny widow walks by and drops in a penny and doesn't even stop and just keeps on going. And what does Jesus notice? Out of all that noise and out of all that entire scene, he notices that one little old lady dropping in her silent penny. And he calls attention to that and he says, she has given a bigger proportion of her wealth than anybody else. It was not the penny that he noticed. It was the proportion of what she had that he noticed. For her, that penny was everything. It was all she had to live on. For the rest, for the others, it was a tiny portion of what they had. And Jesus is calling to attention the proportion is what matters. Because the proportion of giving recognizes the amount of trust you have in the source that you are going to receive what you need. If you can give this last dollar, and because you know that God gave it to you in the first place, and that God is the source of it, then you can give it away freely if it's your last one. If you believe that it comes from your ability to produce, then you become fearful. And you hold on to it because what if I can't produce anymore? If you've ever lost a job, you know what I'm talking about. When you lose that ability to produce, it's the most fearful thing, at least it was for me. Because I felt like I no longer counted, I no longer had value because I couldn't contribute. I couldn't support myself. I needed unemployment, I needed my savings, and so forth. But when we know that God is the source of all that we have, the source of life, then this becomes irrelevant. We know that all of our needs will be met, that the creator and sustainer of the universe is going to be there when we need that sustenance, when we need to be provided for, and that bank will never run dry. And that widow knew the source of her penny. And she knew, and she could trust that source, that the next penny would be there when she needed it. So she gave 100% because she knew that it came from God in the first place. And so the last question about money for us to consider is, where is our trust? We have written on here, in God we trust. That's pretty ironic. We put in a dollar bill, in God we trust. If we really trusted God, we wouldn't need the dollar bill. We would trust one another. We would trust each other. And we would trust ourselves. And we would provide for each other as we could and needed. And we wouldn't have to buy and purchase, but we do. So where is our trust? Is our trust in ourselves, or is it in God? Is our trust in something that we can continue to make, we can continue to create in our lives, or is it that God is going to be there for us when we need it? Just as God provides for the birds and the grass and the animals, consider the lilies of the field, they neither sow nor reap. Yet Solomon in all his wonder was never arrayed as one such as these. If God cares for the birds of the air and the grass of the fields that are here today and gone tomorrow, how much more will God care for you? If we believe that God is the source and we trust, then what we do with this comes out of that trust. It's not about the amount. It's about the trust. It's about what's in here. It's about where we place our hope. It's about where we place our source of strength, our source of life. This can be the greatest tool for good and the greatest tool for evil. That saying money is the root of all evil, it's not in the Bible. It's something that we've created because we know that this can be a source of great, great evil. And just on the other side, it can be a source of great, great good. This is neutral. This has no value in it whatsoever. This does not decide what to do. The person holding it decides what to do. And that's a reflection of who you are and who we are. And so we have to examine those beliefs and those thoughts in order for our spirituality to be real and authentic and lived out honestly in this world. Would you join your heart with mine in prayer? Loving God, you have given us many things in our life, many things to provide for us, one of them being money. But most of all, beyond that, you've given us the ability to live and move and have our being. Help us to examine our hearts and to discover the meaning that money has for us and the ways in which we can use it. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. The words